I'm Callan Rhodes, and the day I married Marissa Quinn feels like a lifetime ago, though it's only been a couple of years. Standing under that golden canopy, I believed every word she said, every vow she whispered with that soft smile. Her hand fit perfectly in mine, her eyes sparkling like she meant it when she promised forever. I thought I was the luckiest man alive, staring at a woman who wanted the same life I did, a home, a family, a future we'd build together. The music played, the guests clapped, and I felt like I was stepping into a dream. But looking back, I see it now. It wasn't a dream. It was a performance, and I didn't even know I was part of the script. Marissa was good at that, making you believe what she wanted you to believe. I didn't see it then, not when I was so caught up in the moment, not when I thought love was enough to make everything work. I was wrong, but that day, I had no clue. I just stood there, grinning like an idiot, thinking this was the start of something real. We danced under the stars, her head on my shoulder, and I told myself this was it. My life was finally falling into place. I didn't notice the way her smile tightened when I talked about waiting a few years for kids, or how her laugh sounded just a little forced when I mentioned my startup taking up most of my time. I was too busy picturing the years ahead, the house we'd buy, the memories we'd make. I didn't know those moments were already slipping away, even as I held her close. After the wedding, we moved into a small townhouse on the edge of the city. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours: 2 bedrooms, a tiny backyard, and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee. Marissa decorated it with little touches: a framed photo of us at the beach, a vase she painted herself, curtains she picked out because they felt like home. I loved coming back to it after long days at the office, even if I was exhausted from pitching to investors or debugging code for my app. The startup was my other dream, the thing I poured my heart into when I wasn't with her. It was supposed to be our ticket to a better life, more money, more time, maybe even that bigger house she kept mentioning. She said she understood why I worked late, why I missed dinners sometimes. She'd kiss my forehead and tell me she was proud that we were building something together. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. We'd sit on the couch some nights, talking about the future. She'd bring up kids, how she wanted a boy with my eyes or a girl with her smile. I'd laugh and say, someday, yeah, but let's get the business off the ground first. She'd nod, but there was this look in her eyes, like she was waiting for something I wasn't giving her. I didn't push it. I thought we had time. I thought we were on the same page. But those talks started to fade. She stopped asking about baby names or pointing out cribs in store windows. I didn't notice at first. I was too busy with work, too caught up in meetings and deadlines. My startup was finally getting traction, and I was riding that high, thinking I was doing it all for us. I'd come home late, and she'd be asleep, or she'd be on her phone, barely looking up when I walked in. I told myself it was normal, that every couple goes through phases. I didn't see the distance growing, didn't hear the silence creeping in where her laughter used to be. I kept working, kept chasing the next milestone, thinking she'd be there when I finally looked up. One night, I found her staring out the kitchen window, her arms crossed tight. I asked what was wrong, and she just shook her head, said, "Nothing, Callan. Just tired." I should have pressed her, should have sat her down and made her talk. But I didn't. I kissed her cheek, grabbed a beer, and went to check emails. That's how it went for months, me missing signals, her pulling away, both of us pretending everything was fine. I'd catch her looking at me sometimes, like she was studying me, trying to figure out if I was still the man she married. I didn't know what she saw, but I know I wasn't paying enough attention to find out. I was so sure we'd work it out, that love was enough to fix whatever was bending between us. I kept telling myself we'd get back to those early days, the ones where we'd stay up late talking about nothing and everything, where her smile was all I needed to feel like I was enough. But the truth? I was losing her, and I didn't even know it. I didn't know she was already rewriting our story, casting me as the fool while she planned her next move. I didn't know the promises we made under that golden canopy were already crumbling, or that the life I thought we were building was just a stage for her to play her part. I stood in that townhouse, surrounded by the things we chose together, and I thought it was home. I thought it was ours. I thought she was mine. And maybe that's where I went wrong, not in loving her, but in believing she loved me the same way. I didn't see the cracks in her performance, didn't hear the lies in her silence. I just kept living in the dream she built for me, not knowing it was about to collapse. I stood there, day after day, thinking we were forever, while she was already halfway out the door. I'm Callan Rhodes, and I can still picture that night like it's burned into my brain, the moment everything started to shift. I came home late, as usual, my eyes heavy from staring at spreadsheets and my shoulders tight from carrying the weight of my startup's latest pitch. The house was quiet, too quiet, and Marissa was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands folded around a small white box tied with a blue ribbon. She didn't look up when I walked in, just pushed the box toward me and said, "Open it." Her voice was soft, but there was something in it, a challenge, maybe, or a test. I dropped my bag, confused, and sat down, tugging the ribbon loose. Inside was a pacifier, small and plastic, and next to it, a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines. I stared at it, my mind blank, like someone had hit pause on my thoughts. "You're serious?" I said, looking up at her. She nodded, her smile bright but unsteady, like she was waiting for me to match it. I wanted to feel something, joy, excitement, anything, but all I felt was a knot in my chest, tightening with every second. I wasn't ready. Not for this. Not now. My dreams flashed before me, the business I was bleeding for, the freedom I wasn't done chasing, the life I thought we'd planned to build slowly, together. I tried to speak, to find the right words, but what came out was, "Marissa, I don't know if I can do this yet." Her smile vanished. Her eyes filled with tears, and she stood up, walking away without a word. That night, I slept on the couch, the pacifier staring at me from the coffee table like an accusation. I didn't know how to fix it, didn't know how to be the man she needed right then. I just knew I was drowning in my own head, and I couldn't pull myself out. The days that followed weren't better, they were worse. It wasn't like we sat down and talked it out, hashing through our fears like a normal couple. Instead, we started a war, not with yelling or fighting, but with silence. Marissa would look at me across the breakfast table, her hand resting on her still flat stomach, and say things like, "You're never here, Callan. Do you even care?" I'd mumble something about work, about needing to keep the business afloat, but it sounded hollow, even to me. I wasn't lying. The startup was eating every second of my life, every ounce of my energy, but I wasn't telling her the whole truth either. I was scared. Scared of being a father, scared of failing her, scared of losing the life I'd been building for us. But I didn't say that. I didn't know how. Instead, I let her words hang in the air, unanswered, and I'd grab my keys and head out the door. She'd cry sometimes, soft sobs I could hear through the bedroom wall, and I'd stand there, frozen, wanting to go to her but not knowing what I'd say. I started staying at the office later, finding excuses to avoid the tension at home. A client meeting that didn't exist, a bug in the app that could have waited, anything to keep me out of that townhouse, away from her disappointed eyes. I told myself I was giving her space, that she needed time to cool off, but deep down, I knew I was running. Not from her, exactly, but from the version of myself I was failing to be. The warmth in our home, the one we built with laughter and late-night talks, turned cold, like someone had flipped a switch. The kitchen didn't smell like coffee anymore. It smelled like nothing, like the life had been sucked out of it. Marissa stopped cooking, stopped leaving notes on the fridge, stopped asking me how my day was. I stopped trying to make her smile. It was like we were strangers sharing the same space, moving around each other like ghosts. I'd catch her staring at her phone, her fingers typing fast, and I'd wonder who she was talking to, but I never asked. I didn't want to know. Or maybe I was afraid to know. I kept telling myself it would get better, that we'd find our way back to each other once I got the business on track, once I figured out how to wrap my head around being a dad. But every day, the distance grew. Her tears became background noise, something I learned to tune out, like the hum of the fridge or the creak of the stairs. I hated myself for it, but I didn't stop. I kept moving forward, or at least that's what I called it, moving forward. Really, I was just standing still, letting the life we'd built slip through my fingers. One night, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, a suitcase by the door. My heart stopped. "What's this?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. She didn't look at me, just said, "I need space, Callan. I can't do this alone." I wanted to argue, to tell her I was trying, but the words stuck in my throat. I saw the pacifier on the table, the same one from the box, and it hit me. She was carrying our kid, and I was letting her feel like she was in it by herself. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but she shook her head and walked to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. I stood there, staring at the suitcase, knowing I'd messed up but not knowing how to fix it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, replaying every moment since she'd given me that box, every chance I'd had to step up and didn't. I thought about the kid, about what it would be like to hold them, to be their dad. I wanted to want it, but all I could feel was the weight of it all. Her, the baby, the business, me failing at everything. I didn't know how to be enough for her, for them. I didn't know how to stop the spiral we were in. So I did what I'd been doing for weeks. I shut down. I pushed it all down, locked it away, and told myself tomorrow would be different. But tomorrow wasn't different. It was just another day of silence, another day of her looking at me like I was a stranger, another day of me proving her right. I'm Callan Rhodes, and the day I left Marissa still sits heavy in my chest, like a stone I can't shift. It wasn't a big scene, no screaming or slamming doors, just a quiet decision that felt louder than any fight we'd ever had. I came home that night to our townhouse, the air thick with the same silence we'd been choking on for weeks. Marissa was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove, her back to me like always. I stood in the doorway, watching her move, her hand resting on her stomach where her kid, was growing. I wanted to say something, to bridge the gap that had turned into a canyon between us, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I felt this wave of exhaustion, not just from the long hours at the office, but from carrying the weight of her disappointment, my guilt, and a future I couldn't picture anymore. I didn't plan to leave right then, but standing there, I realized I couldn't stay either. Not like this, not when every moment in that house felt like a reminder of how I was failing her. So I made a choice, one I'm still not sure was brave or cowardly. I walked upstairs, grabbed a duffel bag, and started packing. Socks, shirts, a couple of jeans, half my stuff, nothing more. I didn't touch the photos on the dresser or the watch she'd given me for our first anniversary. I wanted to leave those behind, like they could hold my place until I figured things out. Downstairs, Marissa didn't look up from the stove, didn't ask what I was doing. Maybe she knew. Maybe she didn't care. I stood at the counter, scribbling a note on a scrap of paper. Handle things however you want. It was cruel. I know that now, cold and vague, like I was washing my hands of her, of us, of the kid. But in my head, it wasn't like that. I wasn't abandoning her. I was giving her freedom, letting her decide what came next without me dragging her down. I was confused, not heartless, but I didn't know how to say that. I didn't know how to tell her I wasn't ready to be a dad, that I was scared of being trapped in a life I hadn't chosen. So I left the note on the table, picked up my bag, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind me, and I stood on the porch for a second, half expecting her to call me back. She didn't. I got in my car and drove to a cheap motel across town, the kind with flickering neon signs and sheets that smelled like bleach. Lying on that lumpy mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, I told myself I'd done the right thing. Marissa deserved better than a husband who couldn't step up, and I needed space to figure out who I was without her voice in my head, asking me to be someone I wasn't. But the truth? I wasn't thinking straight. I was running not from her, but from the mess I'd made, from the man I was supposed to be. The days after that were a blur. I threw myself into work, staying at the office until midnight, sleeping on a cot in the break room when I couldn't face the motel. Marissa called a few times, left voicemails I didn't listen to, sent texts I didn't answer. Callan, please, we need to talk. Where are you? Don't do this. Each one hit like a punch, but I deleted them, told myself it was better this way. I wasn't proud of it, but I wasn't strong enough to face her either. I kept waiting for the guilt to fade, for the weight to lift, but it didn't. It just got heavier, settling into my bones like it was part of me now. I never said the baby wasn't mine, not once. That thought didn't even cross my mind. I was scared, yeah, but I wasn't that guy, the one who dodges responsibility with excuses. I just needed time, or at least that's what I told myself. Time to think, time to breathe, time to make sense of the life that was moving faster than I could keep up with. I stayed in that motel for weeks, living out of my bag, eating takeout, and pretending I was in control. My startup was doing okay, better than okay, actually. We'd landed a small investor, and the app was starting to get downloads. I buried myself in that, letting the numbers and the code drown out the noise in my head. I didn't talk to anyone about Marissa, didn't tell my friends I'd left. I just kept moving, one foot in front of the other, like if I stopped, I'd have to face what I'd done. Then one day, I got a call from Jake, an old buddy from college who still lived in town. He sounded awkward, like he didn't want to be the one telling me. Hey man, you okay? I saw Marissa at some bar last night. She was with someone. My stomach twisted, but I laughed it off, said it was probably just a friend. Jake didn't push, but his voice stayed with me. That hesitation, that pity. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know, but it planted a seed, a question I couldn't shake. Had she moved on? Already? It didn't seem possible. Not the Marissa I knew, the one who'd cried when I left, the one who'd begged me to come back. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The texts had stopped. The calls had dried up. She wasn't fighting for me anymore. I lay awake that night, staring at the motel ceiling again, wondering if I'd pushed her too far, if I'd lost her for good. I didn't know what she was doing, who she was with, or what she was planning. All I knew was that I'd walked away, left her to figure it out alone, and now something was shifting, something I couldn't see yet. I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd made my choice and she'd make hers. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Deep down, I knew I wasn't ready for whatever came next. I'm Callan Rhodes, and the day those court papers showed up at my doorstep, I felt the ground tilt under me. I'd been staying in a rented apartment by then, a step up from the motel, but still bare, just a couch, a bed, and a TV I never turned on. My startup was keeping me busy, the app gaining users, investors calling, but none of that prepared me for the envelope a guy in a cheap suit handed me. I tore it open, standing right there in the hallway, and saw her name, Marissa Reed. Not Marissa Quinn, not my wife anymore, but Reed. The word hit like a slap. She'd remarried? Already? My eyes scanned the page. A court summons, a claim for child support, housing costs, medical bills, and something called emotional damages. The child, she said, was mine, and she was coming for my money. I read it again, slower, trying to make sense of it. 3 months had passed since I'd walked out, 3 months of silence after her text stopped, and now this? I leaned against the wall, my head spinning, not because of the money. She could have it if she needed it, but because of the name next to hers, Silas Reed. Her new husband. I knew that name, though I wished I didn't. She'd mentioned him once, maybe twice, back when we were still together, calling him just a co-worker when I asked why she was texting him late at night. I'd let it go then, too tired to fight, too trusting to dig. But now it was clear, Silas wasn't just a co-worker. He was her husband, and they were dragging me into court together. I stood there, papers in hand, feeling like a fool for not seeing it sooner. The day of the hearing came fast. I put on my best suit, the one I wore to pitch meetings, and drove to the courthouse, my stomach knotted tight. I hadn't spoken to Marissa, hadn't called her to ask what this was about. What was there to say? She'd made her move, and I'd figure out how to handle it. Walking into that courtroom felt like stepping into a cage. The place was packed, lawyers, clerks, people I didn't know, all staring like I was the main event. Marissa was already there, sitting at a table with a man I assumed was Silas. She looked different, her hair shorter, her face sharper, but her hand rested on her belly, rounder now, a reminder of the kid she said was mine. Silas sat next to her, tall, broad-shouldered, with a smug grin that made my jaw clench. He leaned over, whispered something to her, and she nodded, her eyes flicking to me for a second before looking away. I took my seat, alone, no lawyer, just me and the papers I'd been served. I hadn't hired anyone, didn't think I needed to. I figured I'd tell the truth, whatever that was, and let the judge sort it out. The hearing started, and Marissa's lawyer got up first, a wiry guy with glasses who talked like he was selling a story. He called me irresponsible, said I'd abandoned my pregnant wife, refused to support her, and now was dodging my duties as a father. Every word was a twist of the knife, painting me as some deadbeat who'd run off without a care. I sat there, hands folded, trying to keep my face blank, but inside, I was burning. Not because he was right, he wasn't, but because Marissa was letting him say it. She was sitting there, head high, letting this guy tear me apart while Silas smirked like he'd already won. When it was her turn to speak, she stood up, her voice steady but sharp, like a blade wrapped in. "This child is yours, Callan," she said, looking right at me, then at the judge. "I deserve your money. I've been raising this baby alone because he walked away." The room went quiet, every eye on me, waiting for me to crack. Silas chuckled, a low sound that carried across the room, and I felt my hands tighten into fists under the table. I wanted to stand up, to tell her she was wrong, to ask how she could sit there and act like I was the only one who'd broken things. But I didn't. I stayed still, my heart pounding, my mind racing through every moment we'd had, every fight, every silence, every time I'd failed her. I wasn't perfect, far from it. But this wasn't just about money or a kid. This was personal. She was trying to bury me, and Silas was holding the shovel. The judge looked at me, his face unreadable, and asked if I had anything to say. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. What could I say? That I didn't know if the kid was mine? That I'd left because I was scared, not because I didn't care? That I'd never stopped thinking about her, even after I walked away? None of it felt right. Not here, not in front of these strangers. So I shook my head, said, "Not yet, Your Honor," and sat back down. Marissa's lawyer kept going, piling on more claims, backdated support, therapy costs, even money for lost opportunities because she'd had to quit her job. It was a laundry list, each item feeling like a brick stacked on my chest. Silas leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching me like a hawk waiting for its prey to stumble. I didn't look at him. I didn't look at her either. I just stared at the table, trying to keep my breathing steady, trying to figure out what I was even doing here. I'd walked away to give her space, to let her figure things out, but this wasn't figuring things out. This was war, and I was standing in the middle of it, unarmed. The hearing ended for the day, and I stood up, my legs heavy, my mind a mess. Marissa and Silas walked out together, her arm looped through his, her head held high like she'd already won. I stayed behind, watching them go, feeling the weight of her words. "This child is yours," echo in my head. I didn't know what to believe anymore. I didn't know if she was lying, if she was desperate, or if she just hated me that much. All I knew was that I wasn't going to let them roll over me. Not like this. Not without a fight. I'm Callan Rhodes, and sitting in that courtroom, watching Marissa and Silas play their parts like seasoned actors, I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not fear, but a quiet kind of resolve. They thought they had me cornered, thought I'd crumble under the weight of her accusations and his smug grins. Silas even leaned over before the hearing started, close enough that I could smell his cologne, and whispered, "Should have kept your zipper shut, man." His laugh was low, taunting, like he was daring me to swing. I didn't. I just looked at him, my face blank, and turned back to the table, my hands steady. They didn't know what I knew. They didn't know I'd been carrying proof in my back pocket for months, proof I hadn't planned to use unless they pushed me too far. And now? They pushed me way past that line. I stayed silent, letting their lawyer ramble on about my so-called abandonment, letting Marissa spin her story about how I'd left her to struggle alone. I didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me sweat. Because while they were busy painting me as the villain, I was remembering every detail that led me here, details they thought I'd missed, details they thought I'd never find. It started months before she told me she was pregnant, back when things between us were already fraying. I'd noticed little things at first, Marissa staying late at work, her phone buzzing at odd hours, her quick excuses when I asked who she was texting. "Just a friend," she'd say, or "work stuff. You know how it is." I didn't push, didn't want to be that guy, the jealous husband who checks her phone while she's in the shower. I trusted her. I loved her. But trust is a fragile thing, and those little things started adding up. One night, I saw her smile at a message, a real smile, the kind she hadn't given me in weeks. I asked who it was, casual as I could manage, and she snapped her phone shut, said, "Nobody, Callan, God, why do you care?" Her voice was sharp, defensive, and it planted a seed, a doubt I couldn't shake. I didn't want to believe she'd cheat, didn't want to think she'd lie to me like that. But the seed grew, and soon I couldn't ignore it. I did something I'm not proud of. I hired a private investigator. It wasn't impulsive. I wrestled with it for days, pacing my office late at night, asking myself if I was crazy, if I was turning into someone I didn't recognize. But I needed to know. I needed answers, not just for me, but for the life we were supposed to be building. So I made the call, met a guy named Vince in a diner across town, and handed him a check. He didn't ask many questions, just took Marissa's name, her work address, and a photo from our wedding album. "Give me a week," he said, and I nodded, feeling like I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Vince was good, too good, maybe. Within days, he had a file, phone logs showing late-night calls to a number I didn't know, dates and times when Marissa wasn't where she said she'd be, even receipts from a hotel bar where she'd met someone. Then came the big one, a video, grainy but clear enough, of Marissa and Silas checking into a resort 3 days before she gave me that pregnancy test. I watched it alone in my motel room, my stomach twisting as she laughed, her arm around his, her head tilted the way it used to tilt when she looked at me. I didn't cry, didn't yell, just sat there, letting it sink in. She'd been with him, not just once, but for months, while I was working late, trying to build a future for us. I kept the file locked in a drawer, told myself I wouldn't use it. Not unless I had to. I didn't want to hurt her, didn't want to drag us through that kind of ugliness. I just wanted to understand, to know why she'd pulled away, why her home had turned into a battlefield. Even after I left, I held on to that file, not out of spite, but because it was the only thing that made sense when nothing else did. Now, sitting in that courtroom, I felt the weight of it again, not the file itself, but what it meant. Marissa was betting I'd stay quiet, that I'd take the hit and pay up, too proud or too broken to fight back. Silas was betting I was as weak as he thought I was, some spineless guy who'd run from a kid and a checkbook. They were wrong. I wasn't the one being unfaithful, not then, not ever. I'd messed up, sure, walked away when I should have stayed, shut down when I should have talked, but I wasn't the liar here. They were, and I had the proof to show it. I didn't want to use it, didn't want to turn this into a war where nobody wins, but they weren't giving me a choice. Every word from her lawyer, every smirk from Silas, every tear Marissa dabbed away for the judge, it was all a performance, and I was done being their audience. I sat there, my hands folded, my face calm, while my mind ran through the details, the video timestamp before her pregnancy announcement, the phone log showing calls to Silas when she said she was with friends, the hotel receipt with her signature. It wasn't just evidence, it was a story, one they didn't know I could tell. I thought about the kid, the one she swore was mine, and wondered if she even believed it herself. Did she know the truth and lie anyway? Or had she convinced herself I was the father because it was easier than facing Silas? I didn't know, and right then, it didn't matter. What mattered was the game they were playing and how they thought I'd fold. I wouldn't. I couldn't. Not because of the money. I'd have given it to her if she'd asked, if it was really about the kid, but because of the lie. They were trying to rewrite my life, to make me the bad guy in a story I didn't write. I wasn't going to let that happen. So I stayed quiet, let them think they were winning, let them think I had nothing to say. But inside, I was ready. I was ready to show them exactly who they were dealing with. I'm Callan Rhodes, and standing in that courtroom, I felt the air shift, like the moment before a storm breaks. The judge's eyes were on me, steady and unreadable, as Marissa's lawyer finished his speech, piling on accusations like I was some deadbeat who'd never cared. Marissa sat there, her face a mask of hurt, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, while Silas leaned back in his chair, his smirk sharp enough to cut glass. They thought they had me, thought I'd sit there, take the hit, and let their story stick. But I was done playing their game. I'd been quiet long enough, letting them talk, letting them think I had nothing to fight back with. Now it was my turn, and I wasn't going to shout or beg. I was going to let the truth do the talking. The judge cleared his throat and looked at me. Mr. Rhodes, do you have anything to say in response to these claims? My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady as I stood up, buttoning my jacket like I was heading into a business meeting. I looked at Marissa, then at Silas, and finally at the judge. Your Honor, I said, my voice calm. I wasn't going to do this. I didn't want to drag things into the open like this, because I thought we could handle it quietly. But she left me no choice. I reached into my wallet, moving slow, deliberate, and pulled out a folded photo I'd kept there for weeks, not for sentiment, but for this exact moment. It was a still from the video my investigator had sent me, time-stamped and clear, Marissa and Silas at a beach resort, her arms wrapped around him, both of them smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. The date on the photo was a full week before the pregnancy date she'd given the court, before she'd handed me that pacifier and told me I was going to be a dad. I held it up, letting the judge see it, letting the silence stretch. This is my ex-wife and her new husband, I said, taken 3 days before she told me she was pregnant. I'd like to submit this, along with other evidence, to show that her claims about me, about this child, aren't as clear as she's making them out to be. The courtroom went still, like everyone was holding their breath. Marissa's face drained of color, her eyes wide, locked on the photo like it was a ghost she couldn't escape. Silas shifted in his seat, his smirk gone, replaced by a hard line that said he hadn't seen this coming. Her lawyer started to stand, stammering about relevance, but the judge raised a hand, silencing him. Let's see it, the judge said, his voice flat but firm. I handed the photo to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. I stayed standing, my hands clasped in front of me, watching as he studied it, his brow furrowing. I didn't need to say much, the picture said enough, but I wasn't done yet. I'd brought more, just in case they tried to twist their way out. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folder, thin but heavy with the weight of what it held. Your Honor, I said, I also have phone logs showing calls between my ex-wife and Mr. Reed going back months before I left, during times she told me she was working late or with friends. There's a hotel receipt from the same resort, signed by her, and a report from a private investigator I hired when I started noticing things weren't right. I didn't want to believe it, didn't want to bring it here, but I can't let her claim this child is mine when the timeline doesn't add up. I handed the folder over, my voice steady even though my chest felt tight. I didn't look at Marissa. I couldn't. I didn't want to see her tears, real or fake, or the way she tried to spin this into something else. I kept my eyes on the judge, waiting, knowing I'd done what I had to. The judge took the folder, flipping through it slowly, his face giving nothing away. The room stayed quiet, except for the rustle of papers and a low mutter from Silas, something like, "This is ridiculous." Marissa's lawyer jumped up, his voice louder now, saying I was trying to distract the court, that the evidence wasn't verified, that I was slandering his client. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, just stood there, letting him flail. The judge didn't look at him either. He was reading, his fingers pausing on the phone logs, then moving to the receipt. Finally, he closed the folder and looked at Marissa. "Ms. Reed," he said, "care to explain this?" His tone wasn't angry, but it was sharp, like a teacher catching a kid in a lie. Marissa opened her mouth, then closed it, her hands twisting the tissue in her lap. She glanced at Silas, like he could save her, but he was staring at the table, his jaw tight. Her lawyer tried to jump in again, saying something about needing time to review the evidence, but the judge cut him off. "We'll take a recess," he said. "I want everyone back here in an hour. Mr. Rhodes, I'll hold on to these for now." I nodded, sitting down as the bailiff called for a break. People started moving, whispering, but I stayed put, my eyes on the table, feeling the weight of what I'd just done. I hadn't wanted to use that photo, that folder, any of it. I'd hoped I could walk away without turning this into a fight. But Marissa had stood there, looked me in the eye, and lied to a room full of people, saying that kid was mine, saying I owed her for a life I didn't choose. And Silas, with his whispers and his laughs, had pushed me just far enough to make me push back. As the courtroom cleared, I heard Marissa's voice, low and shaky, talking to her lawyer, but I didn't catch the words. I didn't need to. The photo was out, the folder was with the judge, and whatever happened next wasn't up to her anymore. I leaned back in my chair, my hands still steady, my mind clear for the first time in months. I'd played my card, not out of spite, but because it was the only way to stop their game. Now all I could do was wait and see what the judge would say when we came back. I'm Callan Rhodes, and when I walked back into that courtroom after the recess, the air felt heavier, like everyone knew something had broken and couldn't be put back together. The judge was already at the bench, his glasses low on his nose, the folder I'd given him open in front of him. Marissa sat at her table, her shoulders stiff, her eyes fixed on her hands like she could avoid the mess she'd made by not looking at it. Silas was next to her, his face red, his fingers tapping the table like he was itching to bolt. I took my seat, alone, no lawyer, just me and the truth I'd laid bare with that photo and those papers. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. There was no victory in this, just a raw, hollow ache where my life with Marissa used to be. But I wasn't here to feel good. I was here to end the lies, to stop her and Silas from rewriting my story into something I didn't recognize. The judge didn't waste time. He looked at Marissa, his voice firm but calm, and said, "Ms. Reed, care to explain this?" He held up the photo I'd given him, the one of her and Silas at the resort, time-stamped a week before she claimed she got pregnant. Her lawyer started to stand, but she put a hand on his arm, stopping him. She looked up at the judge, her face pale, her lips trembling like she was trying to find words that wouldn't come. I don't know what to say, Your Honor," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "That was a work trip. It doesn't mean what he's saying it does." Her words sounded thin, like she didn't even believe them herself. I didn't react, didn't shake my head or scoff, just sat there, letting her talk, letting her dig her own hole. The judge raised an eyebrow, flipping through the folder again. "A work trip," he repeated, his tone flat, like he was giving her a chance to rethink it. "Then perhaps you can explain the phone log showing calls to Mr. Reed at all hours, or the hotel receipt with your signature, also timestamped before the pregnancy date you provided." Marissa's lawyer jumped in, his voice louder now, saying they needed time to verify the evidence, that I could have faked it, that it wasn't admissible without proper chain of custody. But the judge wasn't having it. He leaned forward, his eyes on Marissa, not her lawyer. "Ms. Reed, I'm asking you directly. Is there anything you'd like to clarify about these documents before we proceed?" She looked at Silas, then at me, her eyes glassy with tears that didn't fall. For a second, I thought she might tell the truth, whatever that was, but she just shook her head, her voice small. "No, Your Honor. I don't know what else to say." Silas muttered something under his breath, too low to catch, but it made her flinch. The judge closed the folder and turned to me. "Mr. Rhodes, anything further?" I stood up, my hands clasped, my voice steady even though my chest felt tight. "Your Honor, I didn't want to bring this here. I didn't want to make this public. But Ms. Reed's claiming I'm the father of her child, and the timeline doesn't add up. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I made mistakes. I left when things got hard, but I'm not the one lying here. I'd like the court to order a DNA test to settle this once and for all." The judge nodded, like he'd been expecting it. Marissa's lawyer started to object, saying a test wasn't necessary, that it would delay proceedings, but the judge cut him off with a raised hand. "Counselor, sit down. Given the evidence presented and the discrepancies in Ms. Reed's claims, a DNA test is reasonable." He looked at Marissa again, his voice sharper now. "Ms. Reed, you've made serious allegations in this court. If they're true, the test will confirm it. If they're not, there will be consequences for misleading this court." Marissa didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at her hands, her tissue crumpled into a ball. Silas leaned away from her, his chair creaking, like he was trying to distance himself from the whole thing. The judge wrote something down, then looked up. "We'll order a DNA test immediately. This court will reconvene in 2 weeks with the results. In the meantime, I'm holding Ms. Reed's financial claims in abeyance. Mr. Rhodes, you're to cooperate fully with the testing process." "Understood." I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." He banged his gavel, and the hearing was over, just like that. People started moving, chairs scraping, voices murmuring, but I stayed where I was, watching Marissa and Silas. She didn't look at me, didn't stand up right away, just sat there, her shoulders shaking like she was holding back a sob. Silas grabbed his jacket, his face twisted with something between anger and embarrassment, and whispered something to her lawyer before heading for the door. I didn't care what he thought, didn't care about his glares or his whispers. I cared about the truth, and now it was coming, whether they liked it or not. As I gathered my things, I felt the weight of that photo in my wallet, lighter now, like I'd finally let go of something I'd been carrying too long. I'd laid it all out, the video, the logs, the receipt, and I didn't feel good about it, didn't feel like I'd won some big fight. I felt tired, like I'd been running for months and could finally stop. Walking out of the courtroom, I passed Marissa's table, close enough to hear her lawyer muttering about damage control. She looked up at me then, just for a second, her eyes red, her face a mix of fear and something else, regret, maybe, or defiance. I didn't stop, didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. I'd done what I had to, not to hurt her, but to protect myself from a lie I didn't deserve. Outside, the air was cool, the sky gray, and I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing slow, letting the moment sink in. The test was coming, and with it, the truth, whatever that was. I didn't know what Marissa would do next, didn't know if she'd try to fight or run. All I knew was that I'd stood up, shown them I wasn't the fool they thought I was, and now the rest was out of my hands. I walked to my car, my steps steady, my mind clear. 2 weeks, and this would be over, one way or another. I'm Callan Rhodes, and those 2 weeks waiting for the DNA test results felt like holding my breath underwater, every day stretching longer than the last. I went through the motions, work, meetings, coding late into the night, but my mind was always on that courtroom, on Marissa's pale face when I showed the judge that photo, on Silas's smirk crumbling into something sour. I didn't know what I'd feel when the results came, didn't know if I wanted to be right or wrong about the kid. All I knew was that I needed the truth, not just for me, but to close the door on the life I thought I'd had with her. The day of the hearing came, and I drove to the courthouse, my hands tied on the wheel, my suit pressed but my nerves frayed. Walking in, I saw the same crowded room, the same faces whispering, but it felt different now, like the story was about to end, not just twist again. Marissa was there, sitting stiffly at her table, her hands folded over her belly, bigger now, a reminder that time hadn't stopped for any of us. Silas was next to her, but he didn't look at me, didn't flash that cocky grin I'd gotten used to. His eyes were on the floor, his jaw tight, like he knew something I didn't. I took my seat, alone again, no lawyer, just me and the weight of what was coming. The judge didn't keep us waiting. He walked in, his robe swishing, and sat down, a sealed envelope in his hands. My stomach twisted, but I kept my face still, my hands folded on the table. He opened the envelope, pulled out a single sheet, and read it silently, his expression giving nothing away. The room was so quiet I could hear Marissa's lawyer shuffle his papers, could hear Silas's foot tapping under the table. Finally, the judge looked up, his eyes moving from me to Marissa, then back to me. "The results of the DNA test are conclusive," he said, his voice clear, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Mr. Rhodes, you are not the biological father of the child." The words hit me like a punch, but not the kind that knocks you out. More like the kind that wakes you up. I didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there, letting it sink in. I'd suspected it, planned for it, even bet on it when I showed the judge that photo and those logs. But hearing it out loud was different. It was final. The kid wasn't mine. Marissa wasn't just lying to me. She'd lied to a court, to everyone, and now it was out in the open. I didn't look at her, didn't need to. I could feel the room shift, could hear the low gasp from somewhere behind me, the rustle of people leaning forward. The judge wasn't done. He set the paper down and turned to Marissa, his voice harder now, like he was holding back anger. "Ms. Reed, you've made claims in this court that have been proven false. You've attempted to mislead this court, misrepresent facts, and commit paternity fraud. That's not a small matter." Marissa didn't speak, didn't move. I glanced at her then, just for a second, and saw her staring at the table, her face white, her hands gripping each other so tight her knuckles were pale. Silas shifted in his seat, his head dropping into his hands like he could hide from what was happening. Her lawyer started to stand, saying something about mitigating circumstances, about Marissa's emotional state, but the judge raised a hand, silencing him. "I'm not interested in excuses," the judge said. "This court relies on truth, and you've wasted its time and resources. I'll be considering sanctions, including fines and a public record of this fraud. Your financial claims against Mr. Rhodes are dismissed, effective immediately." He wrote something down, his pen scratching loud in the quiet room. "This matter is concluded for now, but Ms. Reed, I strongly suggest you consult with your counsel about the legal consequences you're facing." He banged his gavel, and it was over, just like that. The room erupted into murmurs, people standing, chairs scraping, but I stayed where I was, my hands still folded, my eyes on the table. I didn't feel relieved, didn't feel like I'd won. I felt empty, like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long I didn't know how to stand without it. Marissa's lawyer was whispering to her, his voice urgent, but she didn't respond, didn't look up. Silas stood, grabbing his coat, and walked out without a word to her, his steps fast, like he couldn't get away quick enough. I watched him go, his shoulders hunched, and wondered what he'd say to her later, if he'd stand by her now that their plan had collapsed. I didn't care, not really, just noted it, like I was watching a movie that didn't matter anymore. The judge left the bench, and the bailiff started clearing people out. I gathered my things, my notepad, my pen, the empty wallet where that photo used to sit, and stood up, my legs steady even though my mind was spinning. I'd gotten what I wanted. The truth, clear and undeniable, written on a piece of paper that said I wasn't tied to her anymore, not by a kid, not by a lie. But it didn't feel like freedom, not yet. It felt like the end of something I hadn't wanted to lose, even if it was never real to begin with. As I walked toward the door, I heard Marissa's voice, soft and shaky, saying something to her lawyer, maybe an apology, maybe an excuse. I didn't stop, didn't turn around. I'd seen enough, heard enough. The test had done its job, and so had I. Stepping into the hallway, I felt the courthouse air hit me, cool and sharp, like it was waking me up. I didn't know what Marissa would do next, fight the sanctions, try to explain herself, or just disappear with Silas. I didn't know, and for the first time in months, I didn't need to. The truth was out, and it wasn't my burden anymore. I walked down the steps, my shoes echoing, and headed for my car. The sky was clear, the sun low, and I let myself breathe, slow and deep, like I was remembering how. It wasn't over, not completely, but it was close, and that was enough for now. I'm Callan Rhodes, and stepping out of that courthouse felt like walking out of a fog I'd been lost in for months. The air was crisp, the kind that stings your lungs just enough to remind you you're alive. I stood on the steps, my hands in my pockets, watching cars roll by, people moving through their lives like nothing had changed. For them, nothing had. For me, everything had. The judge's words still echoed in my head. Marissa's claims dismissed, sanctions coming, the DNA test proving I wasn't the father. I'd gotten what I came for. The truth, laid bare for everyone to see. But it didn't feel like a win, not the way I thought it would. It felt like closing a book I'd never wanted to finish, one I'd hoped would end differently. As I started down the steps, I heard her voice behind me, soft and unsteady. "Callan, wait." It was Marissa, standing by the courthouse doors, her coat pulled tight around her, her face pale under the gray sky. I stopped, not because I wanted to talk, but because something in her voice sounded broken, like she was holding herself together by a thread. I turned, keeping my distance, and looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. Her eyes were red, her hands twisting the strap of her purse, and for a second, I saw the woman I'd married, not the one who dragged me through this mess. "I just wanted security," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think it would go this far. Her words hung there, fragile, like she thought they'd fix something. I didn't move, didn't soften. "No," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You thought I wouldn't fight back." Her face crumpled, tears spilling over, but I didn't step closer, didn't offer comfort. I'd spent too long carrying her pain, letting it twist me into someone I didn't recognize. She opened her mouth, maybe to explain, maybe to apologize, but I shook my head. "Marissa, it's done. You made your choices. I made mine." I turned and walked away, my steps steady, her quiet sobs fading behind me. I didn't look back. Halfway to my car, I saw Silas in the parking lot, pacing by a black SUV, his phone pressed to his ear. He was yelling, his free hand waving, something about needing space and not signing up for this. He didn't see me, and I didn't stop, just kept walking, letting his voice blend into the city noise. Whatever was happening between them wasn't my problem anymore. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove, not sure where I was going at first, just needing to move. The city blurred past, shops, lights, people, and I let my mind settle, let the weight of the day sink in. I'd fought for myself, not out of hate, but because I had to. I'd shown them I wasn't the fool they thought I was, and now I was free, not just from Marissa's lies, but from the version of me who'd let them happen. A week later, I got a letter from the court. The judge had followed through. Marissa faced fines, a public record of paternity fraud, and all her claims against me were officially thrown out. I read it once, then set it aside. It didn't change anything, didn't erase the months of doubt or the nights I'd spent wondering where I'd gone wrong. But it was closure, and that was enough. I didn't call anyone, didn't post about it online, didn't tell my friends the details. I just went back to work, back to building my startup, back to the life I'd been putting on hold. That same week, I did something I hadn't planned. I'd gotten a refund from the private investigator, some overpayment he didn't need, and instead of keeping it, I donated it to a legal fund for fathers dealing with custody battles. It wasn't much, just a few $100, but it felt right, like I was passing on the chance I'd had to fight back. I didn't need the money, didn't need the reminder of what it had bought me. I just wanted it to help someone else, someone stuck in the same kind of trap I'd been in, someone who needed proof to stand up for themselves. The days after that were quiet, not in the heavy way they'd been before, but in a way that felt steady. I started running again, something I hadn't done since Marissa and I were together. I'd go out in the mornings, the streets still dark, my breath puffing in the cold, and I'd push myself until my legs burned and my mind cleared. It wasn't about forgetting her, it was about remembering me, the guy I was before the lies, before the doubt, before I let her choices define mine. I'd come back to my apartment, shower, and get to work, coding or meeting with investors, watching my app grow into something real, something I'd built through all this. I didn't hate Marissa, didn't wish her pain, even after everything. I just didn't want her in my head anymore. I wanted to move forward, not keep looking back at a story that wasn't mine to write. One night, I sat on my couch, a beer in hand, and thought about the kid, not mine, but still hers, still real. I wondered what she'd tell them one day, how she'd explain the father who wasn't me, the fight she'd lost. I hoped she'd do better for them than she'd done for me, hoped she'd find a way to be honest, even if it was hard. But that wasn't my story anymore. My story was here, in this apartment, in the work I was doing, in the life I was choosing now. I set the beer down, leaned back, and closed my eyes, feeling the quiet settle around me. It wasn't perfect, wasn't easy, but it was mine. I'd fought for it, not with fists or shouts, but with a photo, a folder, and a truth I wouldn't let go of. And now, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe, not just survive, but live on my terms, with nothing holding me back. I'm Callan Rhodes, and months after that courtroom cleared, life started to feel like mine again, not the way it was before Marissa, but something new, something I was building one quiet step at a time. I didn't talk about the case, didn't post cryptic updates online, or tell my friends every detail over beers. I let it sit, let it fade, like a bruise you stop noticing after a while. The startup kept me busy, growing faster than I'd expected, users climbing, investors calling, my app turning into something people actually needed. I'd spend my days coding, tweaking features, or pitching to new partners, and it felt good to have something solid to hold on to, something I could shape without it slipping through my fingers. Nights were quieter, just me in my apartment, cooking simple meals or watching old movies, letting the world slow down. I wasn't running anymore, not from Marissa, not from myself. I was just living, and that was enough. I started dating again, but slowly, nothing serious. Trust is a tricky thing after what I'd been through, like a muscle you have to rebuild one careful lift at a time. There was a woman from work, Sarah, who'd grab coffee with me sometimes, her laugh easy, her questions gentle. I liked her, liked the way she didn't push, but I wasn't ready to jump into anything. I'd tell her about my day, my app, maybe a funny story from a meeting, and she'd listen, her eyes bright, not asking for more than I could give. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a start, a reminder that not every story has to end like mine did with Marissa. I didn't need fireworks or promises. I just needed honest moments, and Sarah gave me those without expecting anything back. Healing, I learned, isn't loud. It's not some big moment where you wake up and everything's fixed. It's quiet, steady, like the way the seasons change when you're not looking. I'd catch myself smiling at small things, a good run in the morning, a client signing on, the smell of rain through my open window, and realize I wasn't carrying that old weight anymore. Marissa's name didn't sting when I thought of it, didn't pull me back to that courtroom or the townhouse we'd shared. She was part of my past, not my present, and I was okay with that. I didn't hate her, didn't wish her ill. I just wished her a life that didn't involve me, and I meant it. One evening, I got a letter from the judge's clerk, forwarded to my new address. It wasn't about Marissa or the case, but about something bigger. My testimony, the way I'd handled things calm, steady, with evidence instead of anger, had been cited in a legal reform case pushing for stronger protections against paternity fraud. I read the letter twice, sitting at my kitchen table, a half-eaten sandwich in front of me. It wasn't a pat on the back, just a note saying my story had mattered, that it was helping others. I folded it up, slid it into a drawer, and took a sip of my coffee. I didn't need the recognition, didn't need to be a hero in someone else's fight. But it felt good to know I'd left a mark, even a small one, that could make things fairer for the next guy. I thought about the kids sometimes, not mine, but hers, probably Silas's, though I didn't know for sure and didn't care to find out. I wondered what kind of life they'd have, what Marissa would say when they asked about their dad, about the years that shaped them. I hoped she'd tell them something true, or at least something kind, but that wasn't my place to worry about. My place was here, in my life, with my work and my mornings and the people I was letting in, bit by bit. I kept one thing from the trial, not a memento, but a reminder, a line I'd scribbled in a notebook during those long nights waiting for the DNA results. I never said it in court, never needed to, but it summed up everything I'd learned. Truth doesn't need to shout. It waits, and when it finally speaks, it ends the noise. I'd written it late one night, half asleep, trying to make sense of why I wasn't yelling. Why I wasn't tearing into Marissa or Silas the way they'd torn into me. It stuck with me, that idea, that you don't have to be loud to be right, that patience and proof can do more than anger ever could. I looked at it sometimes, when I was cleaning out my desk or flipping through old notes, and it grounded me, reminded me I'd done what I had to, not for revenge, but for me. Life moved on, the way it always does. My app hit a milestone, 10,000 downloads in a month. And I took my team out for pizza, laughing over cheap wine and bad jokes. Sarah was there, sitting across from me, her smile warm, and I caught myself thinking maybe I could let her in a little more. Maybe I could try again without expecting it to crash. I didn't rush it, didn't need to. I had time, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. I'd go for runs, longer now, through parks and quiet streets, the city waking up around me. I'd pass families sometimes. Parents with strollers, kids chasing dogs. And I'd feel a pang, not for what I'd lost, but for what I might want someday, when I was ready, when it was real. I wasn't there yet, but I could see it, faint like a horizon, and that was enough. I didn't hear from Marissa again, didn't expect to. I didn't know where she was, if she was still with Silas, if the fines had hit her hard, or if she'd moved on to some new story. I didn't check, didn't ask around. I let her go, not with forgiveness exactly, but with indifference, the kind that comes when you realize someone's choices aren't your weight to carry. My life was mine now, messy, imperfect, but mine. And I was building it every day, one choice at a time. That night, after the letter, I sat on my couch, the city humming outside, and I felt something settle in me. Not peace, not yet, but close. A quiet that didn't ache, a space where I could be Callan Rhodes, not the guy who'd been lied to or dragged through court, just me. I'd fought for that space, not with noise, but with truth, and now I was living in it, one steady breath at a time.